You're listening to the Soulless Minions of Orthodoxy alternative DVD commentaries. Our film for today is from 1997. It's called Gattaca, written and directed by Andrew Niccol. I am joined today by John from Sofa Dogs and Tysto of Tysto.com. Say hello, guys.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi.
Thank you very much for joining me today. I am without Justin again. Unfortunately, he was not able to attend. But we had a great time recording Galaxy Quest previously, so this is a bit of a different sci-fi film, but a little bit more on the serious side, but we'll get into that when we get into it. But if you'd like to watch the movie with us, which we hope you do, our sync point for today is the first black point immediately after the Columbia logo has faded away. So go ahead and set that up on your DVD player or AVI file, what have you. Don't discriminate. I'm going to give you a countdown. It's going to go like this: 3, 2, 1, unpause. And when you hear me say unpause, we'll all do so together and watch the movie in sync. Okay?
So if you should be paused right there, I will give the countdown, and we will begin on 3, 2, 1, go. Consider God's handiwork. Who can straighten what he hath made crooked?
You sound like a Skeksis just then.
You're so enthusiastic, Tysto. I don't know how you manage to do that every time.
I'm excited about these movies. Not terribly excited about this movie in particular. I remember seeing this in the theater in 1997 and enjoying it, but kind of being left kind of cold. And since then, I've found that I'm kind of left cold by most of Andrew Niccol's movies.
Really? Well, since we're seeing his credit on screen, let's talk a bit about Andrew Niccol and his other works. How do you feel about Lord of War, for instance?
It left me cold.
Left you cold.
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely, I'd say, warmer in tone, at least in its color palette, than this film is. This
is quite sepia almost, isn't it?
It does have a sepia tone, and there's a lot of green in it as well, I would say. I'm a fan of Mr. Niccol. I think he's a very interesting writer and director. He did write The Truman Show and
I like that
The
quite
Terminal. A lot. Very, very good films. And this was actually one of the first screenplays that actually I read online. This is when I tried to fancy myself a screenwriter of sorts, until I found out that I wasn't any good at it.
Well, this is an interesting one to study, to be sure, yeah.
It was an interesting read. I recall the description of this opening sequence. It didn't describe hair and nails or of any sort. These objects on the page were described as large tree branches of some sort. It was interesting to read, and I found it kind of logistically, I think, would have been difficult to write out because, as you know, the character of Ethan Hawke, he plays a character named Vincent, but through most of the film he goes by the name of Jerome. And in the actual screenplay, there's a little note to the reader. From now on, Vincent will be referred to as Jerome, and Jerome will be referred to as Eugene. It was interesting, but it was a good read. It was a good read.
John, what's your feeling overall
on Andrew Niccol?
Yeah, but in this movie.
Well, I think this was the first Andrew Niccol film that I saw. And it was at a time when I had sort of just started really getting into just like who wrote something and who directed something and who shot something and who scored something and who edited something and all that stuff. Beyond, just who's in something. And I just started like picking up names and paying attention to filmmakers. And it's interesting because I think this is probably, out of the few Andrew Niccol films that I've seen, this is probably my favorite. But I will agree that a lot of his work does have this weird... It's like it's so finely crafted to the point of a kind of perfection that can leave a person cold and detached. And it's especially interesting with this movie because this movie is dealing with very sort of tragic and touching and moving sort of experiences and emotions. But there are elements of it that I don't know if the film could be improved in some way, or at least if it can, I can't think of how.
It'd be kind of like taking apart a toaster and trying to improve it. And I don't like the shape of this toaster, but it's really well put together.
Right. And I think, I mean, back when I saw it originally in 97 or so, I liked the film, but sort of now having a better appreciation and understanding of how films are made and the work that goes into them, and then looking at this film years later, I kind of wonder why. I think maybe it was ahead of its time in that I bet if you made a film like this today, it would
not star Ethan Hawke.
Well, there's, I mean, sure, or Uma Thurman for that matter.
I love Uma Thurman, but not so much in this movie.
Yeah, no, I think they're both good. I think Jude Law is the standout in this movie.
He is.
Yeah. But it would certainly be cast accordingly if it were made today. But I wonder if it would now sort of become like an Oscar contender for like Best Picture, just the way it's so finely crafted and like a lot of the issues that it deals with.
It is kind of Oscar bait. Yeah, I don't know if they were really going for that in this, but it does have that feel. Yeah, it's interesting how they sort of seem to set up Ethan Hawke like maybe he's a villain. The way he reacts there and the way he's doing all this sneaking around. The first time you've seen this, maybe you're not so sure that if he's supposed to be the bad guy or not.
It's an interesting opening, us going through his routine and not really sure what is going on. But I agree with what John just said about, and you as well, Tysto, about it being very well honed. And I think that could be said for all of Andrew Niccol's work. And you were mentioning that you don't think it could be improved in any way, and I'm not sure if it could be, since it is so very finely honed. But something I thought about while rewatching this was, I wonder what it would be like without Ethan Hawke's voiceover.
That's a factor, yeah.
That made me think again about Blade Runner. There's versions of Blade Runner where there's a voiceover, and then there's versions where there isn't. And I started to think, well,
Dark City is like that as well.
Dark City, that has it has a voiceover from Kiefer Sutherland, if I remember correctly.
and in the director's cut, that was a thing that's similar to Blade Runner that was originally not supposed to be a thing. Mm-hmm. You were supposed to go into the film
cold
with no preconceived notions or information,
mm-hmm.
and you were going to learn as the main character did about the world and the characters. And then of course some studio exec was like, "Oh, I don't get it.
Yeah,
therefore the audience won't get it." Mm-hmm. So we have to have a voiceover narration that just gives exposition and info dump and explains everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you could take out not all, but some of Vincent's voiceover narration, and instead open the film on the character being born versus, with him working at this place already.
I didn't think about changing the sequence of events. That's interesting. I just I thought of how it might play without his voiceover guiding us through and just letting us discover the story as it goes, not necessarily knowing what is going on. But I'm sorry, what were you saying, Derek?
Here's the beginning of the 25-minute flashback. Basically, the entire first act is the setup of Jerome's life, or Vincent's life.
Yeah. See, I would actually, if you were going to drop the opening narration at least, I would open here. I would start the movie here.
But then you don't have a frame story, right? Because you almost need that present day start, because otherwise you've got literally 25 minutes of montage.
Yeah, this is a bit of a montage.
But part of the reason that it's a montage is because of the necessity for voiceover. They've edited and shot it this way for the voiceover. But if you go into, I would say, like, if you go into the writing stage of it and then later in the filming stage, then these scenes could be opened up and extended more. And if we were going to open here with this character being born, we could sort of just spend a little bit more time with him in his youth and with his family.
Right, but here's
the
problem. This film isn't about this. This film is a film noir murder mystery, but we don't care about the murder. We care about the guy who's accused of murder. That's one of the major problems of the film, I think.
You think? I mean, I always felt that, yeah, it does have a noirish feel.
We don't even know who the dead guy is.
No, we don't. Well, we know he's a part of the Titan project.
Right. He is a director. We never saw him alive.
No. It does have a murder mystery element to it, but it's very much in the periphery.
Yeah, that was sort of my goal in what I was proposing, was to sort of.
Can I cut you off for a moment,
ditch
John?
the murder mystery altogether?
that woman, for sci-fi fans out there, I just looked her up before starting this commentary. That is Shelby from The Best of Both Worlds, Part 1 and 2 from Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Sorry, the mother or
the
nurse?
The preschool teacher.
Oh, the teacher. Okay, sorry, yeah.
That just closed the gate on them. Actually, the nurse is Una Damon, who is, you might recognize her face, but might not know her name. She pops up in small roles. She was in Spider-Man. She was in Deep Impact. She had a cut part in Free Enterprise. She gets around.
This is a really good cast in general. There, Tony Shalhoub pops up, and Gore Vidal
Excellent
and everything.
cast.
Yeah,
but I'm sorry, John. Please finish your thought.
Yeah, I was just saying that my whole sort of theory in approaching this in a different way would be to sort of further. Even further put Vincent's story and his life to make us further care about him up more in the forefront. And the murder mystery, I would probably keep the same. I wouldn't necessarily do away with it altogether, because that is ultimately the sort of running conflict or stakes, as it were, that leads us to feel concern for Vincent being found out. But of course, when we do ultimately learn that he didn't actually kill the guy, and I never really bought that he did either. I think is also a problem.
Well, yeah, I don't think the audience is ever in doubt of that. Are we supposed to be?
I know.
Honestly, I think you're supposed to worry a little bit, but
because of the way he's introduced and everything.
Well, that's interesting, John. I'd never heard that point of view before. I'd never thought of him being a suspect, because we're in his eyes, so to speak, and we know the truth from his point of view, and that he didn't murder the director. But that's interesting. I'd never thought of it that way before.
I think it would have played better if we had seen him have a conflict with the director and really actually suspect him of being the murderer, or the other way around, if it played like this, and then at the end we discovered that he in fact was the murderer, and Gore Vidal was covering up for him, or something like that.
Well, perhaps that would detract from ultimately what this movie is about.
That's a good point, sure.
Or maybe it would detract from us liking Vincent if, it's like, look, dude, I understand.
Do you like Vincent? I don't find myself liking him very much.
Oh, really? As a protagonist?
I have a hard time sympathizing with him.
Well,
Not
that brings
he's
up
a criminal or anything, but I don't know. He doesn't. do anything heroic, does he?
Well, that's I suppose not. Well, he will later on in the film. I suppose we'll get there when we get there. But that brings up an interesting, well, to me, interesting thought for myself. I think when I first saw this, I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it on TV, and it was very emotionally. It impacted me very much so at the time. I think I was probably around 16 or 17 years old, and I was in high school, and high school wasn't a particularly good experience for me. And
were you also conceived in the back of a Riviera?
Yeah, coincidentally.
Yeah, that'll do it.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, in high school, it's all about popularity and looks and trying to fit into that social structure, and I did not fit in at all. And I felt
Did you
very
live in the
much,
1960s like these characters?
Yeah, and everything was a sepia tone.
Yeah. I love how they tell us it's the not so distant future.
Mm-hmm.
Even though before all that, I was like, it looks pretty futuristic to me, you guys. But then this looks like the 1960s.
It does. It has a kind of retro.
Oh yeah, they use
Futuristic
cars from the
look to
1960s. They're driving Studebaker Avantis and
yeah, it's like a
Citroen.
retro.
Yeah,
it's like retro future, like Forbidden Planet, like the way they kind of envisioned the future. It's kind of retro-esque in a way
because it's going for film noir.
Mm-hmm. Which is nice.
It's a mix
really
of hard sci-fi and film noir. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were saying this was you connected with this very emotionally because you also hate your brother.
Oh no!
Should Justin know something? Should he be on this call?
Well,
maybe that explains why he's not.
What have you done with Justin?
I love doing commentaries. You never know where it's going to lead you. Well, growing up, honestly, yeah, I have two brothers, and there can be a rivalry between brothers.
Yep.
I'm not sure if you two both have siblings, I assume.
Yeah.
I have a twin sister and a teenage half sister that has only come into my life fairly recently. So,
well, has there been any rivalry between? And that's
is she taller than you?
No, actually, she's. I'm short already. She is shorter than me, so that's not an issue. My sister and I, my twin sister and I, like we, for the most part, and especially now. We get along really well. Years ago, when we were kids, there were, little moments of sort of one-upmanship or, small moments of like resentment. When we were really little, like, 10 and younger, we actually used to beat the crap out of each other.
Oh, really?
It's like she'd go to school with a black eye, I'd go to school with bite marks on my arm, stuff like that.
Wow, that's quite something.
But, we grew out of it.
Justin, your brothers?
And,
I'm sorry?
Sorry, you were saying about your brothers?
Oh, yeah, there was a bit of a rivalry, I guess. Nothing that was very present, at least in the open. I felt that me being the youngest, that I always had expectations to live up to their accomplishments, but it was never a huge problem. Why this film was so kind of resonant to me was, as I said, during high school when I saw it, I didn't fit into the social world of high school, and it's all about popularity and looks and whatnot, and I knew I wasn't going to get by in this world on my looks, alone. That's just not going to happen. I'm not a good-looking man or anything like that. So,
for further information on this, see our Bring It On commentary.
Oh,
hey, I'll dish out a little bit. I mean, you don't know what I look like, but I think everyone can relate to that in a way. But
yeah, Ethan Hawke isn't really short on looks, but
no, well, Ethan Hawke is a very he's an out. It's the outsider mentality. I'm very attracted to stories about outsiders. I always have been, because I've always felt like an outsider, and particularly at that age when I first saw this. So I really connected with the character of Vincent and this world he lived in, where he wasn't going to succeed based off of his natural abilities. Only through sheer determination and willpower was he going to be able to succeed and make it in this world. And
There's a sort of a racism allegory going on here, right? Ultimately.
Genoism.
Oh, totally, total Genoism, yeah, and that's a little bit of, I think, possibly the only thing that kind of makes me like Vincent a little, at least, is that he is the underdog of this story.
Underdog, yeah. That's why I felt it was very easy to sympathize with his character, empathize with him. Mm-hmm. And I'm a bit biased because I have a quote-unquote man crush on Ethan Hawke, I guess you could say.
There we go.
I have two strong man crushes. Ethan Hawke is one of them. The other one is John Cusack.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. Which is probably why I like One Crazy Summer so much. But
I love that movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe we'll do a commentary for One Crazy Summer.
I prefer Better Off Dead, but
they're both great.
They're stupid.
Yeah. But I have a man crush on Ethan Hawke, so pretty much anything he's in, I really enjoy, particularly Before Sunrise and Before Sunset.
Even Great Expectations?
Even Great Expectations. I love this guy. He has what I call the X factor, just something you can't describe. I'm just drawn to him, and I find him to be very good looking in a non-traditional way. I wish I could look like Ethan Hawke. I wish I just was him, actually. That'd be better. But
this is getting creepy.
I would hope that you would have a better career. He hasn't really had that great of a career lately.
Well, I think he's done some interesting work in his later years. He's become sort of a novelist.
His later years of turning 40?
Yeah, he wrote two books. He wrote Ash Wednesday and...
Oh, really? Yeah.
The Hottest State. I did see the film adaptation of The Hottest State, which was actually very, very good.
Yeah, he's also a director, so that's the thing. It's like, though you may not see him in front of the camera a lot these days, he's gotten to a point where he can sort of choose what he wants to do, and he likes to go for either interesting projects or interesting characters, things that he hasn't done before.
He directed Chelsea.
And that explains that.
Chelsea Walls.
Chelsea Walls in The Hottest State. Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of either one of those.
Oh, they're both very good films. But if I could direct us back to the screen for a moment, we just had Ernest Borgnine on screen. Did any of you find it interesting that we had Ernest Borgnine come out of the blue?
Well, no,
this is a great cast.
His name is in the credits, so.
Well, I just meant that I hadn't seen Ernest Borgnine in a while, and him popping up in this film I thought was rather strange. It didn't really seem to fit with his oeuvre of films.
Well, no, because, he's done a few sort of science fiction adventure pictures.
The Black Hole, for instance.
Yeah.
Well, he's kind of playing the character that you kind of expect him to play, the blue-collar, everyman kind of guy.
Well, as either of you, I don't believe have the DVD of this film, at least not the version I have. Mm-hmm. There are cut scenes available on the DVD, which are actually pretty interesting, and there's a cut scene with Ernest Borgnine, which is actually two scenes melded together, and it is revealed that Ernest Borgnine does know who Vincent really is.
Yeah, see, I could sort of tell, like,
mm-hmm.
I could sort of tell from, like, the way the film already plays out, and I thought, and maybe this would have been more sort of interesting, I think, if it had been revealed at the end that Ernest Borgnine killed the director because he found out who Jerome really was and liked Vincent enough to allow his charade to continue.
That would have been interesting as well, yeah.
Yeah, I had never thought of that before. Interesting.
Like maybe you could, build some kind of thing like he never had any kids or he couldn't or something.
Or maybe Tony Shalhoub did it.
Or that. I don't know.
You're right. I mean, this movie does have a great array of supporting actors. Tony Shalhoub, of course, and we had Elias Koteas playing his father, and he's one of my favorite character actors.
Yeah, he's always terrific to see, yeah.
And he does pop up in another one of Andrew Nichols' films. Simone is a very small part.
He and Chris Maloney should play brothers or something. They look. I get them mixed up. Chris Maloney's on one of those CSI, not CSI, sorry, Law and Order shows.
Law and Order.
SUV, I think.
Yeah.
Or SVU, or one of those.
I get them confused myself. Don't feel bad.
So we're still in this long flashback.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting. I mean, what we're doing, obviously, setting up Ethan Hawke and his life of the life of a lie that he's living, and now we're introducing Jude Law at last, the super athlete chosen boy who
mm-hmm.
we learn later tried to kill himself and is now in a wheelchair, so he can't live the life that Vincent is now going to take over.
Well, I love that we're getting this information of how like great he is genetically, and the first time we see him, he's smoking.
Yeah, a lot of smoking in here.
And that cracks me up.
Well, smoking is one of the trademarks of noir style, and I like that it kind of has that green tinge to it. The smoke, like I said, there's a lot of green in this.
Yeah, but it's not really.
They kind of I think red is the only thing that doesn't get used a lot. We get a lot of yellow and green and blue. And I love the staircase in the background.
Sort of a double helix.
I love that staircase. Yeah, no, totally. That's totally what they're going for.
But about the smoking, though, it's not really a hallmark of astronauts to be smoking. And Ethan Hawke smokes quite a bit later on. Mm-hmm. But this film has a strange idea about space travel in general. Andrew Niccol apparently believes that astronauts in the not too distant future, will fly into space in suit and tie.
I found that interesting as well. I was going to mention that when we got to the end. That they don't seem to change into astronauts' garb of any kind. They just stay in their double-breasted suits.
And they don't do any like zero-G training underwater in spacesuits and stuff. They just run on a treadmill.
And they do that little, whatever that thing is, the little spinny, what are those called?
Yeah, the Vitruvian Man exercise machine, whatever that thing is.
Yeah, I forget what those are called.
Well, yeah, there's a similar piece of equipment at NASA that they train in. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
I can't remember. I'm
not talking about the vomit comet. I'm talking about
the multi-axis trainer. I think that's what it's
something
called.
like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm just trying to remember Space Camp, but I think that's what it is. But I find this interesting. Look at this. This photograph doesn't even look like Jude Law.
It doesn't. It looks like an underwear model or something. Who is that guy?
It does. It's just a way of saying that, Tony Shalhoub has that line, when was the last time anybody looked at a photograph?
Yeah.
And that's true. They don't.
It's kind of a mathematical average of Ethan Hawke and Jude Law.
That's an interesting way to put it. And look at this portrait. I guess that's supposed to maybe subtly pitch to us the egotistical nature of Jude Law, at least in the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, why would he have this photograph of himself framed in this fashion? It's interesting.
Yeah, and
because he's that pretty.
Yeah, and for some reason that becomes his security ID photo. My security ID photo is not one that I brought in with me, that I had a professional photographer do. The security guy just went, sit there. Okay, there, you're done.
And look at this. He is so determined that he was willing to have surgery and have his legs operated on. I mean, this is something that really drew me to the character, that he will not give up no matter what stands in his way. He's going to achieve his goal.
Yeah.
Now here's a question. Since both of these guys presently do not have the use of their legs, how do they get anything done? How do they get around?
Yeah, just have pizzas delivered.
Well, Jude Law can still, move around.
He can roll around, but it's like, how did Ethan Hawke get up there?
Maybe Tony Shalhoub stops by every now and then and helps them out.
I guess.
The hookers that they call occasionally shift them around. Put me up on this table.
Speaking of Jude Law, I wrote down in my notes, was this his beginnings? I don't recall ever seeing Jude Law before this.
Yeah, I mean, this was basically sort of like
his entry.
Yeah, I mean, more or less. So like the first thing he had done was he's in a film, Paul W.S. Anderson's first film called Shopping.
Paul W.S. Anderson of Event Horizon and Resident Evil fame.
Uh-huh. And so they'd done a film together. I want to say it was like a student film or something that was turned into that ultimately became his first feature or something. But yeah, that was where Jude Law got his start, and he wasn't really anybody at this point. So like if you look at posters and things for the movie, like back in the day, his name isn't on it.
Yeah, he was like a supporting character in Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, and he was like the little boy toy boyfriend. Even in
it really wasn't until The Talented Mr. Ripley where people, sat up and took notice of Jude Law. But yeah, that's why I try and
this. I mean, I remember after this, like I know who this guy is now.
Yeah, well, I think that like he was, like his name wasn't getting on like posters and things until Talented Mr. Ripley.
Yeah. This film wasn't. It was very well received, but it didn't do very well from what I read.
That's not surprising.
Yeah.
It had
a smart sci-fi thriller. Yeah,
yeah. It had a production of apparently about 36 million and only made about 12 million in the States.
Yeah.
I want to point out too, but before we get too far away from it, that Tony Shalhoub says you can't have, or maybe Ethan Hawke says it. I couldn't have the eye surgery because they would see the scars on his eyeballs, but then he has his legs lengthened, like nobody's ever going to notice scars on his legs.
Well, that's not something they test for in this world. They
don't look for that sort of
thing. But he's an astronaut. They're going to give him a full physical.
No, but the thing is, like, you can get, like, the scars can be from anything.
Well, maybe.
Whereas the eye thing, like, okay, you've had eye surgery. Why? That's suspicious.
Yeah, that's something that they do check on later on in the film. We'll see that when he is in the car with Uma Thurman, they check his eyes with a sort of UV light. Yeah,
I'm not sure what the point of that would be. Like, why? I don't know. That's a little strange. I mean, they want to know his identity. That's the main thing.
That's part. Yeah, that's just another example of another way to check for ID.
Well, I also wrote down on my notes about the Futuro aspect of this film, comparing it to other films such as Blade Runner, since it's very heavy on my mind since I just watched it. This is a movie that takes place in the quote unquote not too distant future, and most of the time in film when that happens, it's not a very pleasant future. Humanity is really taking a turn for the worst, like Soylent Green, for instance. But in this, the world seems to be getting along pretty well, and things are looking pretty good.
Well, if you have the right genes.
Well, yeah, there's a downside, of course, but
yeah, I think that's this is one of the rare cinematic examples of a perfect sort of utopian future. And it's a little, you were talking about the sort of racism undertone in this picture. This is a little sort of kind of perfect man, Ubermensch kind of storyline a little bit.
Yeah, it does have a certainly. Not only is it a racist thing, but also there's an element of fascism underneath it, isn't? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, think about films of, say, the late 60s or 80s. They always painted the future as we're all done for. I mean, look at Planet of the Apes and Soylent Green, Omega Man,
Logan's Run,
Logan's Run, Blade Runner. Everything was, well, Logan's Run, I mean, they lived in a nice place, but it was after a world war. But in this movie, humanity is straightened up. Things are looking good. I mean, look at Star Trek. I mean, it's heavily noted that Star Trek is a representation of humanity that has done well for itself. It's there's no racism. There's no prejudice of any kind. People get along, and there's no poor, no rich.
We've finally gotten out of the flashback.
Yeah, we're back.
Yep.
And we finally figured out what his routine was about shedding all of his skin and clipping his nails and whatnot. And there goes the eyelash.
Yeah, yeah.
It's going to be picked up later. I just about the future aspect of it. I love the film's look. It has a very unique look. I was very attracted to the cinematography when I first saw it. Watching it again, I had the feeling of everything's very beautiful, but it's very cold and sterile, kind of like a dentist office almost.
In a way that
get my meaning.
That kind of works against the film because the character himself needs to be cold and sterile, and he lives in that world. I don't know. Maybe the point is that he can blend in because of that. I suppose.
Yeah, that's what it's about. Is that, and that, well, that's kind of the ultimate message of this movie. Is that, you know, because he even says it to Uma Thurman later on about, like, you spend so much time just looking for flaws that's all you see now, and the kind of whole point or message of the movie, I would say, is that it is our imperfections and differences that make us unique and beautiful in our own way. And you look at everything in this movie that has such precision and that is so clean and sterile and in place, as it's like, it's pretty to look at, but it's just not, and it's part of the problem of the movie on the whole, is that it kind of shoots itself in the foot. It's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that it's like, it's very cold and mm-hmm. not somewhere you would feel completely comfortable or free in.
That reminds me of the coda, John, that was excised from this film. It's part of the deleted scenes portion on the DVD. The coda being just simply text on the screen along with images of people that were flawed but were geniuses in their own right because of even with their flaws. For instance, Albert Einstein and was dyslexic, and Emily Dickinson was a manic depressive, and so forth. That's telegraphed in the coda. I can see why they excised it. It wasn't particularly necessary. The point had been made.
Right. Yeah. Now, by the way, we've slipped into an episode of Mad Men.
I've yet to see Mad Men, although I've heard a lot of good things about it.
Here we are drinking bourbon out of the bottle in our suits with French cuffs, and we just need some busty dames walking around to harass.
Yeah.
I always try to bring, I can't help it, but bring some things to reality when I'm watching a character that has become an alcoholic and doesn't exercise or move around. And, Jude Law here, he can't exercise, move around. He's in a wheelchair, but he drinks all the time. I figured he probably wouldn't look too hot by the end of this movie.
He's got good genes. He's like Brick in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, right? Why don't you lose your looks, Brick? Most drinking men lose their looks. Sorry to bust out the Tennessee Williams on you there.
That's all right. Well, now that I'm looking at Uma Thurman, that reminds me of something you just mentioned, Tysto. You didn't care for Uma Thurman in this all too much?
Yeah, that moment there where she's talking with Gore Vidal a minute ago, and she says, "Oh, I don't want to lose my place in the, I don't know, place in line for going into space," or something like that. It's just not a very good delivery. Overall, she's okay in the film, and I like her a lot in other films. I think maybe she just got some poor direction here. I mean, it's a first-time director.
Okay, so you're just...
Yeah, I think maybe that's... and this is going to sound strange or callous, but I'm wondering if maybe the way that you could improve this movie is just to have someone else direct it.
Yeah, Andrew Niccol was 33, and this was his second try at getting a film produced because the first film was too expensive, according to his quote. But so he was barely older than his actors here. His actors are all in their late 20s. Jude Law was 25, and Uma and Ethan were 27, and Lauren Dean was only 28. So it's a real young cast, and he's got some great supporting actors, and he was feeling his way through a weird combination of science fiction and film noir, and he does a good job with it, but not quite a great job, I guess.
I thought it was a very good freshman effort.
Yeah. For a freshman director.
Well, and thank God they didn't, throw him in the dumps completely at first, because as I said, this movie was not financially successful, but I think people could see that there was a talented writer and director.
Well,
and that's why he was given another chance.
Was Simone very successful? Was Lord of War very successful? I don't think In Time is very successful.
Well, Simone, I don't think it was financially successful. It wasn't very well received.
I think Simone was more of an independent picture, wasn't it?
I'm not sure. I don't know about that.
I don't remember it. It didn't get like a wide release.
I did see it. I did see it in the theater. It's an okay movie. It has an interesting concept. The execution of it isn't. I think the way I would go. It plays
well, and maybe that's just ultimately the thing with Andrew Niccol. It's just that the guy's a really good writer. He comes up with really interesting ideas, but something about when he's given the opportunity to execute those ideas, they come off cold and disaffected.
Yeah, because he wrote The Truman Show, and it ended up being really quite a good movie, directed by Peter Weir.
Yeah. And then there's The Terminal, of course, which that's your mileage may vary on that. That was directed by Spielberg, so.
Mm-hmm. Well, I rather enjoy The Terminal, despite its flaws, but I rather enjoy it. The one character in that film that I don't really feel belongs is the Catherine Zeta-Jones character.
Yeah, she didn't exist in the real, because that was about a real guy, except that he wasn't Tom Hanks. He was crazy.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, his films seem to center around outsiders in a way, which is interesting. But
yeah, they're often sort of about outsiders doing things that they shouldn't or are told they can't.
Look, it's the future. He's got an electric car from 1964.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 1964 Studebaker Avanti.
As I said, it's a clean future. And later in the film, we'll see them go to a solar power plant. So the energy is clean.
Yeah. This is a working future, but it's kind of a future where the eugenicists took over.
Mm-hmm. They mentioned during that dinner scene his mission to Titan. And I don't think at this point, the filming of this movie, that our probe had been to Titan. But we do now know what's underneath the cloud cover. At this point, they didn't.
I suspect that was probably a reference to 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? That was Titan?
No, that was another moon of Titan. That was Europa.
Oh, right.
Yes, all of these worlds are yours except for Europa. Use them together. Use them in peace.
Oh, well, naturally, we got to go to Titan instead of Europa then.
Well, Europa.
I like to pretend that at the end of this movie, when Ethan Hawke goes up in space
in his double-breasted suit,
yes, that's when Earth explodes, and then we go into Titan AE.
Ooh, nice. Never seen that one.
So there we got the confession that Jude Law tried to kill himself. Apparently his genes weren't so good because apparently he has a manic depressive manic depressive
it's
gene.
Weird
right?
because it's weird because and maybe that's part of the point is that that's what this movie is about, is that despite it's like I don't care what the genes say, I am going to do this other thing or be this other thing just to spite you. We're told at the beginning that Vincent, when he is born, he has something like a 47% chance of being a manic depressive.
Yeah, all the cards are stacked against him.
He's never really that. Meanwhile, Jude Law, on the other hand,
there are several things he has really high potential for going wrong. I mean, it's not like 99% chances of heart failure or something like that. That's the big one, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So look at this set design. I mean, to me, this just reminds me of modern art in a way, in a sense. I mean, when I think of modern art, I think of those very, very stark paintings you'd see with like just triangles and squares, and it's all very stark, and it's supposed to mean more than it actually shows. To me, it just has that feeling, but I don't know.
Yeah, all of the architecture, the buildings were all chosen for their sort of unity of style, their kind of brutalist, modernist architecture, and it's part of what makes the film nice. And it's a harmony of style, but it's pretty stark.
It is.
But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of perfect circles, and even their desks are curved. That it's funny because that opening shot, you mentioned, like looking at modern art, that opening shot of Gattaca looked like the Guggenheim to me.
Right.
And I thought for a second, I was like, is that where they shot this?
Well, this is Alan Arkin, and I don't know this other actor's name, but to me, I will always refer to him as Mumford.
Mumford. His name is Lauren Dean, but I don't recall seeing him other places.
He was in Mumford and Space Cowboys, but to me, to me, he's always Mumford because he was in the film Mumford, so he's Mumford. He was. But
yeah, Alan Arkin, he is the most noir thing about this picture.
He's very good in this film.
He's even got the hat.
Yeah, he most consistently wears the hat, but we see quite a lot of hats. Yeah.
Look at this prejudice. They're tracking a man because he is, quote unquote, invalid. They automatically assume he is the guilty party because he's an invalid.
Right. Well, it's not bad detective work though, because none of these other people have clear or obvious motives, whereas somebody who is invalid would.
Well, they didn't find any DNA traces on the murder victim from the invalid. All they did was found an eyelash from an invalid on the premises,
right.
And that's suspicious to them. So they automatically jump to the conclusion that this invalid must have had something to do with the murder.
Well, he's a suspect at least. The problem is, though, that we have Ernest Borgnine and his cleaning crew. Therefore, the place must be kind of littered with DNA from people who maybe aren't astronauts.
Well, they're able to sort through those and determine who still works at Gattaca.
Oh, that's a fair point. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, they can do that. They're
because later on, that's the thing they can't account for. Is they're like, okay, we figure it's like, well, maybe it's somebody who used to work here.
Well, they know it is.
It was. So why are they still hanging around?
Exactly. Yeah, and the fact that, as Tony Shalhoub aptly pointed out, nobody pays attention to a photograph. And they have his picture plastered up everywhere, and no one seems to notice because they just don't look at that kind of thing.
Right, yeah. They don't see him. They don't suspect him, yeah. But,
and even if they did, it's like, gee, he looks an awful lot like that guy, but it can't be him because this guy's invalid, and he's not, clearly.
Mm-hmm. It's a good moment when...
I keep paying attention to the guy in the background. Just a little dizzy.
When you see, he comes crashing into the locker room here. He was about to pass out from exhaustion. But even now, Derek, you still have a hard time connecting with Ethan Hawke's character?
Yeah, again, he really doesn't do anything heroic. He's on the run the whole time, and I can only admire him in the same way that I admire the assassin in Day of the Jackal. I admire his ability to pull off this, or nearly pull off this scheme, but what he's doing, I mean, I don't know. I just don't see him as a underdog, really.
See, right here, this is the scene where I thought, like, okay, he knows what's up.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is subtly telegraphed that, he is aware that, yes, he was Vincent. He did work there as a janitor. But as I said in that cut scene, it's stated quite outright, yes. We both know that we've been keeping this secret together. And I think Ethan Hawke's character gives the Ernest Borgnine character a telescope.
Oh wow!
Back to oh cool. Back to what Derek was talking about is, I think part of a problem is that Vincent, through most of or all of the movie, it could be argued, he's very selfish.
He wants to go into space, and I personally can't really connect with his desire because all we see is, he's just staring at rockets. But you're right. Yeah, he's not doing anything to benefit anyone but himself, is he?
Yeah, you're right. I never thought about it that way before because he is so determined. His
Yeah, I mean, like the lengths that he goes to, it's like, geez, man, you have a hard on for going up into space to the point where you're just like, everything else and everyone else be damned.
Well, he's not hurting
I thought it was.
though.
No, but right, and that's why it's like I'm not sitting here going like, geez, what a selfish ass. But at the same time, I can understand your reluctance to sort of like, yeah, but you don't really like him. It's he's not. He never really does anything selfless. There's only one point early on, which is weird that it happens there and not, later, where he says to Jude Law, we can back out now. You don't have to go through with this.
Yeah, where he gives him that option, yeah.
I rather enjoyed that moment. Sorry, the wind must have caught it. It's going to come back later. But Speaking of Uma Thurman, they started dating after this.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, they were married for a number of years, and
they had a child, I believe.
Yeah, and then he cheated, apparently.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that scoop.
And that's the end of that. Yeah,
well,
it happened a couple years ago, I think.
See, there you go. Invalid. His face is all over the place, but no one notices.
Yeah.
Well, we sort of get the suggestion that the director notices here, right?
I never got that impression. I always thought that as the director, he's so blind. Because he wants, he's so keen on getting this mission up and going that he just wouldn't notice something like that.
You think that's a red herring?
Not
that
to
he's
notice
sort of
it.
pointing at his face and then is saying something.
I
thought it was misdirection. Yeah.
No. I think you might be right because, it ultimately gets revealed at the end that he was the guy who killed the director, and it maybe basically he is my earlier idea of Ernest Borgnine being the guy who kills the director, and he does it because he wants Vincent to succeed at his goal. Maybe that's exactly what this guy's doing.
But we don't actually get that as a payoff.
No, because they don't really come right out and say that sort of thing. But that scene we just saw, maybe that's an indicator that he knows what Vincent is up to, and that's why he killed the director, so that Vincent could continue on that path. And he's also got his own sort of, because it's stated later on in the film that the reason he gives is that he wanted the mission to continue because he knew he wasn't going to be alive to see another one.
I can see that point of view, but right here, what Jude Law is saying kind of makes me contradict it when he says, I don't recognize you. They wouldn't believe that one of their elite could have suckered them all. So to me, I could see your point of view that, yeah, maybe he's just so he's so passionate about getting that mission to Titan off the ground that he would choose to look past the fact that he recognizes him as Vincent. To me, it's I've always just felt that he wanted this mission to go forth, but he was so determined, and as what Jude Law just said, he wouldn't want to believe that someone in this elite force of Gattaca could be an invalid.
That's probably the best reading based on what his confession says. I mean, he doesn't. There's no indication that he's lying in his confession, that he really just did it because he wanted the mission to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Taking a look at this movie again, one of the things I found that I wasn't very into this rewatch was the love story between Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke. It didn't connect with me as it did in the past. I didn't feel like it was perhaps strong enough, and maybe a bit extraneous at times.
Well, there's not a whole lot of emotion in it. I mean, they just don't, you know, I don't know. There's no passion.
Chemistry, maybe.
Yeah,
passion. You're right. It is. Like this world itself, it feels a little stilted and cold. And there is a reason, at least given, as to why they can connect on a deeper level. She mentions that she has a heart defect.
Right.
And that's prevented her from going into space. And, of course, he is defective as well. So they can connect on that level. But throughout most of this film, she is unaware that he is a quote-unquote godchild. You know, he is an invalid. She suspects him of being the culprit behind the murder.
Right.
But she doesn't suspect him of being an invalid, no.
But when she finds out...
What I think, and that's... Yeah, when she finds out that he isn't an invalid, that kind of makes their bond stronger because they have something in common, and he even says that. And, of course, that's also why she allows him to carry out his goal.
But in terms of making that romance work, when she finds out that he's been lying to her, all she does, she says nothing, and she just walks out. And then the next time we see her, she wakes up in the car for some reason, and he's there, and they have that quick little conversation, and then all is forgiven. There's no romantic break there. There's no...
Yeah, it's interesting as to why she would cover for him for so long before she even knows he is...
because there's that scene where, you know, she's like, you're a godchild or whatever it was, and
faith
and,
child,
you know, it's where he or faith child, where he has her feel his actual heartbeat, and that's when he says, you know, we have this in common. So there is that scene, and I believe it's directly after the scene you're talking about, where she discovers the two of them and discovers what he's been doing, and it's because she loves him at that point. So it's like, you can see it on her face. She doesn't have to say anything. You can see it on her face that she's hurt for being lied to. But because she loves him, she actually covers up for him and allows him to continue on to his goal. Because when this guy is there, she pretends that Jude Law is Ethan Hawke. Mm-hmm.
But maybe I'm getting mixed up in the continuity of the film. I thought that she had covered for him prior to that scene, when the Hoovers, as they're referred to in this film, the detectives, were investigating at Gattaca. She told him to go home. You know, you don't look too well. Go home. You look ill. She was covering for him. She didn't know who he was at that point, but she had the sneaking suspicion that he was the murderer.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. That was.
So why would she cover for him? Unless, I mean, she obviously must have had an attraction to him, but was that attraction? It never felt strong enough in my mind for her to.
Okay. Well, no, I mean that's fair. But I mean, I think that is where it's coming from, is that she was already sort of falling for him, and back when she, you know, thought he was potentially a murderer, so she tried to help him out and say, like, go home. You're looking ill.
We just missed sorry, but we just missed the bit where Jude Law goes off on the cop, and it's one of the best scenes in the film because it's one of the only scenes where somebody actually speaks their mind and actually cares about what's going on, and he's just harassing. He's just haranguing the cop, pretending that it's harassment. But it's great where it comes from some genuine anger, even though it's a trumped up moment.
It is a good scene. I agree with you. Yeah, and that actor who was playing the Flatfoot, he was recognizable. I can't remember offhand what I know him from, but I recognized his face. But this is an interesting touch. The 12-fingered pianist.
Yes.
Although I wish that they had clarified whether or not this was a manufactured thing or he was born this way.
Well, it seems that this was manufactured.
Oh yeah, I would think that his
His genes
polydactyly
were
was
altered.
programmed.
His genes were altered in a way, and that. Thank you for reminding me, because there was also a cutscene when the parents went to the 8th Day facility, which was the facility where they were talking with Blair Underwood. Is that his name? It's not. Well, it's not cut. It's an extending of that scene where you actually find out that the character of Mumford, Anton, was actually going to be much more than he turned out to be, but they couldn't afford it, which I thought was rather interesting.
Oh,
He
that's
offered
strange.
them, do you want him to be gifted in mathematics or in athletics or something like that? It's going to cost a bit more, and they couldn't afford it. I found that interesting.
Because he says, I sifted out, these various other things like baldness and so on. And they say, oh no, it would be okay. And he says, no, you trust me, you want this. So he sort of gives them that for free. But then there was this extra stuff that he could have been, a genius or something.
Yeah, it was an option.
Instead, he becomes a cop.
Mm-hmm. It's it's an option to the the plan, the purchasing plan. Kind of reminds me of a Total Recall, when he wants to have that dream implanted, and the salesman is trying to,
right.
Oh, what you want is an ego trip. It's the latest thing. It's going to cost a bit more, but believe me, it's worth it.
Yeah,
I think that I think it's interesting about these two brothers that one of them is an invalid and tries to pass himself off as a valid, and the other one is valid and decides of his own accord to live life more or less as an invalid. Like, he gets a job as a cop where he could be this great athlete or this great mind, and he decides to sort of slum it in a way.
He's the lead detective.
There's a little bit.
It does seem like he's not much.
Yeah.
There's a little bit red ahead.
He didn't amount to exactly what he wanted to, even.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that
we missed, by the way, that moment when he declines the cheek swab because he is suggesting that he's just kissed her, and that's actually the first moment that she's complicit in his plan.
And she doesn't bring it up either, but she subtly notes it in her eye movements.
Yeah.
But they don't talk about it. They don't discuss it. And man, he has some horrible eyesight.
This is one of the least
welcome to my world.
Favorite parts of the film.
This is what I see when I take my glasses off.
Did you say favorite or least favorite?
Least favorite. No one will be seated in the exciting crossing the street nearsighted scene.
Well, he could get hit. Now, my problem with it is, wouldn't he have an extra pair of lenses?
Yeah.
He does always seem prepared. Yeah.
There's kind of a lot of that. I mean, at the very end, he goes in, and it's the day that he's going up in space, and it doesn't occur to him that they might do a drug test on that day.
Yeah, he doesn't have that pouch of urine attached to his leg.
Yeah.
Well, he does make a reference to that. I think to Jude Law, he said, I'm not going to get any samples where I'm going. So I guess he didn't think he would.
Right. But overall, one of the things that turned me off about the film overall is it just seemed very silly to posit that they would do these DNA samples every day to get into work. And then they would do multiple drug tests over and over. I mean, that's not so crazy if you're an astronaut and everything. But
well, they usually
honestly, it's like I said, like if this movie were made today with like heightened homeland security and all that crazy stuff,
it might it might even fit in today's world as opposed to 97. That does, I think that could be you could be onto something there. That reminds me of another film that I felt wasn't particularly resonating at the time. It was called The Siege.
Yes, okay.
I saw that before 9/11.
Sam Jackson?
No, this was with
Bruce Willis,
Denzel Washington.
Oh, right. Okay.
It didn't particularly resonate with me because I saw it before 9/11, and then maybe a few years ago, I went back and I watched it again, and I'm like, wow, this movie takes on a whole new meaning now, and I really enjoyed it. prior, because when I first saw it, I didn't really care for it all too much. But after 9/11, it has a different kind of impact on you. So I think you're onto something there, John. That perhaps this was a bit ahead of its time. And this looks like a Dick Tracy watch, didn't it? To me, it did.
Yeah, a bit there, yeah.
Or a fancy calculator watch.
Also, that's kind of a crucial little scene because we set up the idea that he still swims. So later on, when they go swimming, they're doing a little swimming challenge again, which also felt a little false to me.
Really?
We get the idea that, well, I mean, you could very easily say, well, of course he can beat him now. He's a freaking astronaut. He trains all day, all the time. And the other guy is a cop. Why would he be in shape? But there we established that he keeps himself in really shape.
Mm-hmm. You know, that reminds me, when I first saw this, maybe I was just so into the actual story. I was so blinded because I was so attracted to the Ethan Hawke character that I never thought that these two were brothers.
It feels a little obvious
honestly,
to me.
It's obvious to me now, of course, but when I first saw it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is that, like, this was back in 97 or so, and I was 18 or whatever. I didn't pick up on it then, but looking at the movie now, and I had forgotten about that aspect, but as the movie was playing, I was like, oh, I bet that's his brother.
Yeah, it's amazing how.
And just because there are elements, there are things that he does and says that seem to imply that he's trying to protect Ethan Hawke for some reason.
Yeah,
as a brother.
The way he plays it, is like the character doesn't do much. Alan Arkin is the one who's really running the investigation, and Anton, he isn't given enough to do as a character for you not to suspect him, unless, I mean, if you know anything about movies, if you're coming to this young and inexperienced with films, then it's probably going to go over your head. But once you're pretty familiar with how movies are structured, you've watched enough and analyzed them, that character doesn't make any sense unless he is the brother or someone else, really close and important. If he's the killer himself or something.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's set up right from the beginning, and it seems so obvious to me now. And I can't believe that I just didn't notice it at first, but now it just seems very, very obvious. Yeah, he had that little look as Ethan Hawke was standing in line right there to have his blood taken. Anton came up and looked at him, and there was a scene earlier where he saw his picture come up as an invalid. I think he automatically knows that that's his brother. Don't you think?
Well, it's his brother's name, though, right? I mean, it says Vincent Freeman and everything, right?
Oh, it does, yeah. So
they're not just going off a picture, yeah.
Yeah, so already he's covering for him, and he feels he has to, because even though he isn't the eldest brother, he feels he's the superior brother, and he has to look out for Ethan Hawke because he's so weak, so to speak.
I don't know that he suspects that Jerome is Vincent at this point. He knows that Vincent what his brother. He thinks that Vincent might be the murderer, obviously.
Well, I think he knows who Vincent is. It's his brother. He knows what he looks like. He's wondering why his brother is working at Gattaca, and he's hiding that.
But do you think that he actually knows that Jerome is his brother?
Oh, yeah. You mean Ethan Hawke, Jerome? Yes. Yeah. He knows.
Yeah. No, I think he knows.
At this point.
Yeah.
I think he knew immediately when he saw that. When he saw the picture of Ethan Hawke registered as an invalid, when he saw that, he knew immediately. He's just not saying anything about it. And there's also a cut scene,
and that's why he keeps, hanging around Ethan Hawke and going out to, because he says later on, he's like, I can't believe you. It's like, it's been so long, you really didn't recognize me.
Yeah,
because he's basically saying, I knew it was you from the very beginning.
Yeah, I mean, even though it's been years since they've seen each other, he knows who he is. And there's also a cut scene between Alan Arkin and I forgot the actor's name. What was his name again? Playing Anton?
Lauren Dean.
between him and Lauren Dean, where it is revealed that Alan Arkin discovers that the invalid is his brother, and perhaps he was, not being completely open with what he knew.
Yeah, that should have taken about 5 minutes, because as soon as you pull up that guy's DNA, you get his name, and then you go, well, who's his family? Oh, the guy I work with. I mean, that should literally...
Yeah, I'm not sure when it's supposed to have taken place in the continuity of the film, but Alan Arkin keeps it a secret from everyone else. He doesn't divulge it to anybody else, but just to the character of Anton.
It's interesting that and I guess that makes sense why they cut it out, because maybe it would have been one too many, but that happens a lot in this movie, where people will discover an invalid or just something someone is doing that they shouldn't be, and they let them go ahead.
Yeah.
For just, a number of different reasons. Like, it happens with the doctor at the end, and
that's a good point. Nobody actually turns anybody in this film, do they?
Yeah.
That's a very good point. You know what we didn't talk about at the very beginning, when Vincent is born, the mother says she wants to name him Anton, but this is after the nurse starts saying all of the things that have gone wrong or could go wrong with him. The father says, no, don't name him Anton, and chooses the name Vincent instead. Like,
yeah.
I want to, he's already thinking, we're going to try again and have a better baby, and we'll name him Anton.
Yeah. Well, because that's, he says it later on, where he says, my father finally had a son that he deemed worthy to have to share his name. And that was the son that they made versus the one that was conceived. Because it's interesting, because it's like they conceived of a child because they wanted to have a natural, a God child or a faith child. And when it didn't go, we're basically like, nature spat in their face for doing that. Like you had the opportunity to make a perfect child. Do that. Don't be so sentimental. And so after they get punished for it, they go, okay, well, we'll build a child this time.
This is a real film noir kind of scene where the speakeasy gets raided and we have to duck out the back door and everything.
Yeah, and he beats up a cop who's wearing a fedora. And
yeah, I didn't think about that. It is kind of like a raid during Prohibition.
Look at all that green in the background for no reason.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of green in sepia.
Yeah, it's just a big green light right on that building.
I like Uma Thurman's look throughout most of this film, except in these scenes when she has her hair down.
Really? Because that's when I
oh, really?
I think, yeah, because I think that most women who cut their hair really short, it's like having long hair like that is real. It helps to frame the face.
Oh, and the woman falls down and has to be dragged away. Oh, 1990s.
Pretending to be futuristic 60s. Not sure how that works.
I'm flexible on the Uma Thurman hair. I can kind of go either way.
Right. Well, the thing that I was going to mention is that she has a very pronounced nose, and I think the long hair helps to sort of even all that out.
They're going for a Veronica Lake look here is what they're doing, by the way.
Sure.
And now I'm only going to be able to look at her nose.
Sorry. Didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, even when he yells Vincent, I still didn't pick up on what was going on. I feel really, really dumb.
I'm still trying to decide on when he knows and how much he knows, because I don't feel like he is really protecting Vincent from Alan Arkin. I don't know.
No, he does it throughout the whole movie. Like anytime Alan Arkin wants to do something within the investigation that could blow Vincent's cover.
Well, he wants to test everybody again right away and everything. Yeah.
yeah, Anton's like, no, because he wants to give Vincent the opportunity to counter that.
This is the future here.
I like,
Man.
I really like the way this is filmed because, we've seen a lot of sex scenes over the years on screen, and it's like, hey, something different.
It is, and it is interestingly filmed. I do like it quite a bit as well.
I'm not sure if that was supposed to be a mirrored ceiling that we were looking at them in, or if it was just literally just, let's just shoot this upside down for some reason.
I'm not sure.
Does it matter, really? Here's something interesting. Okay, is this movie supposed to be rated PG-13?
I believe so.
I don't know.
Is it? Okay. If it is, then that makes sense, given that there's only one F-bomb, it's not in a sexual connotation, and there's no nudity. Because I was going to say, it's like, it's Uma Thurman. She has no problem showing her boobs. So...
Yeah, look how careful he has to be in this valid world. He can't shed even a single hair.
Yeah, he gets a little weird here. This starts to be pathological at this point.
Well, he has become. I mean, he's become so obsessive over his goals that, he's...
That's a beautiful shot of Uma Thurman, by the way.
Yeah, this is PG-13.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm not sure why. I mean, I'm not sure why. I mean, literally, the one F-bomb is about the only thing. Well, maybe this scene.
Yeah, but you don't see anything,
No.
so it's okay.
He's so determined in what he wants that it's almost stripped him of all joy of life.
Yeah.
He was. I mean, it's obviously been a while since he's been with a woman, and this is why he can't reveal himself to be who he really is. And here, look what he's doing. Even though he got to spend the night with a very attractive woman that he's fallen in love with, he still has to go out and remove all the invalid elements of himself.
Yeah, and he's still affected by it. Like, he has that moment, where he's just like, oh God, I can't look at myself, like.
Well, and she's like la da 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 da, as opposed to, what in the hell was that about? What were you just doing out there?
Well, this is the reference.
I'm a little offended. Like, just after we had sex, you had to run out there and scrub yourself of all the dirty.
Yeah. So are we supposed to be smoking cigarettes together? Yeah. Well, there's the reference to his scars, and she doesn't buy it right here. You can tell, but that was the only reference to a time period that I saw.
Oh yeah.
I have the subtitles on. He said a '99 Chrysler. Yeah. He said, "Do you remember those?" And obviously, so this is supposed to be quite some time from then. Maybe, I don't know, 50 years or so. You think?
See, that's why it's like, I guess it depends on everybody has their different definition of, not too distant, whatever
it's
that
good
means.
That it's
like,
it's good
when they said not too distant future, I'm like, really? It looks pretty futuristic.
It's good
to me.
they didn't give it a time frame, because when that happens, I'll look at.
I honestly feel like you don't need that.
Oh,
card.
You don't. It's not necessary, and I really don't enjoy it when they do that to films. When, say, in films that were obviously quite in the past, when they queue up what year it's supposed to be, they'll just put present day. And I'm like, this isn't the present. This is 1985. Why don't you just say 1985? Or look at Back to the Future 2, of course, is I think the most thought about film in terms of future, at least nowadays. 2015. I mean, that's nothing like what the future is. I mean, that's 5 years from now.
We still got time. Come on. We got to make like
there's still time for hoverboards
about
and
12 more
cars.
Jaws movies, but other than that, I think we're pretty much on schedule.
Well, that's that sort of, that's been my kind of issue with a lot of quote unquote futuristic movies, or movies that depict a particular future, is that they have trouble being really creative or thinking out too far outside the box, because they're still sort of limited by what's around them now. So it's like you watch a movie that's shot in the 50s, but supposed to take place in, the year 2000
Right.
or whatever. And it's like, well, it still kind of looks like the 50s. Like everybody has 50s hair and, like spaceships have like pastel colors and like fins on them. And it just, I don't know.
Yeah, it's the Logan's Run problem. How far in the future is that supposed to be? But really, it looks like the 70s.
Yeah. So the 80s were not, they had a similar problem.
Yeah, we had the moment when Alan Arkin discovered who the real murderer was when he found the saliva sample.
Yeah, and it's also pretty
Off of
clear
the dead
that
man.
Anton, we really know for sure that Anton knows who Vincent is.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where the movie actually finally gets exciting.
Well, yeah, when he this
This is a
dramatic
great
sequence
scene
of him
here.
Oh yeah,
trying to climb up the staircase.
This is a great tense moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember being very tense when I first saw this, wondering like, is this man going to be able to make it up the stairs in time? I mean,
Who is
it doesn't
faster?
seem like it would be that exciting, but
Yeah.
it's telegraphed well, it's edited well, and the music makes it work. And
Yeah. I want to mention. Yeah, the composer is Michael Nyman.
Yes.
Really beautiful score for this movie.
I wanted to bring it up earlier. This is one of the few scores that I actually own on CD. Nowadays it's so easy to find music, online.
Well, just me. I mean, I'm a huge score nut, and I collect scores, and I like revisiting this movie. It's like that's weird that I don't have this score.
It
in any
is
capacity.
very good. It is a very beautiful score, and this was one of the, like I said, one of the few that I actually own on CD, not like on my hard drive. I actually went out and bought the CD back when people used to do that in the old days, and
I remember those days.
yeah, it's one of the few that I own, and I'm still affected by it to this day. It has a lot of great pieces in it.
What's also great about this moment is that it's like not only are you worried, it's like, oh, is he going to get up the stairs in time? What's going to happen? But Uma Thurman is with the guy.
Right, yeah, this is...
And so you're just like, how, even if he makes it up the stairs in time, how is that going to work out?
Yeah.
What's she going to do,
I think Top Gear ought to do this as a... I don't know if you guys watch Top Gear, the British TV show about cars, but they should do this as an actual challenge. A man in a wheelchair trying to get up the stairs versus a Rover P6. Which one is faster?
Well, you also have to discern, like, how far away they are in relation to this place.
They do that. They'll have a car race, a skier,
if there's
or a
traffic,
mountain climber or something.
Like, were there any stoplights? Is there traffic?
You were mentioning another film of Andrew Niccol at the top of the commentary. It's called In Time. I haven't read too much about it. Has it been particularly well received at this point?
No, it has not.
I've heard kind of mixed to negative. I've heard that it's interesting, it's kind of good, but it's also kind of silly, or there are holes that you could drive a truck through. And then of course there's the whole kind of legal trouble that it experienced towards its release from Harlan Ellison.
Oh, another one of those.
Reared his head. It's like, yeah, this is like this story I wrote long ago. You're stealing from me. I want reparation. And of course, he waited until the last possible second when the movie was coming out, not when it was going to be made.
Are you
to raise a fuss.
referring to the gentleman who tried to sue James Cameron over Terminator?
Yeah, same guy.
Oh, he didn't try.
Yeah.
He won.
No,
won.
They settled out of court for an undisclosed amount of money.
Well, but what I mean is that he won
right,
in
yeah.
that on every subsequent release of that film, his name is on the.
What was the story that this was?
Well, in time, I forget the name of the story.
Harlequin, said the TikTok man.
Yes,
that's the
it.
title. Catchy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's a 1960s.
Well, I mean, the Terminator
science
story was
fiction
was it Demon in a Glass Hand?
Yeah,
or
Demon in
whatever?
a Glass Hand. Yeah, and the Guardian, two stories.
Yeah.
Well, I had no idea. I just I saw a few still frames of it, and was that Justin Timberlake?
Yes.
Is he an actor now?
Sort of.
Dude, he's been acting since I'd say since about
He did that movie with the casual sex movie.
I have no idea. I don't.
just Friends with
yes.
Benefits. And then he was also in The Social Network.
Oh, was he?
Very, very, very. Yeah, he's the Sean Parker character.
I saw him in.
Oh, it's good, and he's in Black Snake Moan. He does a really good job in that.
That's right.
Is he the Black Snake?
No.
Okay.
No,
I saw him in Richard Kelly's.
that's
sophomore effort. Southland Tales.
Yeah, he's in
Can't
that
say
as
I'd
well.
recommend that film, but it's interesting to watch.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I actually think he's the best thing about that movie.
I thought it was a bit odd that he broke out into that singing and dancing sequence.
Well, that's Richard Kelly for you.
He likes that.
That whole movie
is odd. Yeah.
But yeah, no, Justin Timberlake. I don't know if he's. What I've basically been hearing is that he's not, tough action leading man material. At least if we're speaking in terms of In Time.
Well, my brother described the plot to me of In Time, and it sounded very interesting.
Yeah, it certainly looked interesting. I can see, but it's apparently not doing so well.
That's a shame. I hope well for Andrew Niccol. He definitely comes up with some interesting concept, if not always completely successful. I'm thinking of Simone, for instance.
Right, yeah.
I really think Lord of War is probably his strongest work. That's the one I've gone back and revisited the most.
Yeah. In Time gets a 38% on the tomato meter from the critics.
Ouch.
Yeah.
See, now, okay, she knows now who he is, that he is an invalid.
Yeah, see, this is the scene where he,
this whole movie is, we haven't talked about the philosophical debate of this film, surprisingly. It's determinism versus free will. Everyone of these valets has their life mapped out for them.
Yeah, because he says at the beginning of the film that, like, when he's born and they draw blood, that's when they know when and how he's going to die.
From the second of his birth, they knew what was to become of him. 99% probability of like heart failure or something like that. 40-year life expectancy or something.
Yeah, 30 years. Yeah. To me, that's another one of the problems with the film, actually, because there's no controversy here. We all recognize that eugenics is bad. We've kind of been through a whole war over that. So there's not really anything to discuss so much.
Well,
even though this resonates
so?
with today in the way that, say, insurance companies work. If the insurance companies discover that you have a certain gene, you may have a serious problem getting insurance. It's relevant at the same time that there's no question, there's no controversy over it. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I think this film kind of demonstrates that, the good versus the evil of genetic tampering. Do the goods outweigh the evil of it?
So
I think.
Is there a good side?
Look.
Well, no,
yeah, I think there is.
I don't think that's what the issue here is.
Okay.
Because the film never brings up the idea of genetic tampering being a good or bad thing. It's the way people use that to make it godlike and sort of apply status.
Well, Ethan
to
Hawke
people
refers to it.
That is
right,
the problem.
Refers to it as the natural way nowadays. That it is the natural way to mess with your genes. That's the natural way these days.
Yeah, but I don't think that's the issue or question here. That's not the moral quandary of this movie. The problem comes in when there are people that apply status to that, and there's a thing of like, it's like the Ubermensch thing. It's like, we just want people with blonde hair and blue eyes, and and white skin.
Right. They even say that it's illegal
but it
to discriminate against the invalids, and yet everybody does it. It's I don't know. It's clearly and obviously, not a good thing to set up your society in the way that they have.
Because we have the guy. That's why I thought it was important to state whether or not that was a genetic tampering thing. Because you have the guy with the extra fingers that can play the piano really well, and he can play that particular piece because you can only play it with 12 fingers apparently. So that's a strike for good. That's saying it is good. So the movie is not. That's not the moral quandary. The movie's not saying genetic tampering is good or bad, and it actually seems to be leaning on the side of good. The problem comes in what people decide to do with that.
I see what you mean. Yeah. That's yeah. I think that, to me, you're absolutely right. I mean, looking at this, it seems to be that this is a good world to live in, but there is no passion. It's completely empty of soul. It strips away parts of humanity that make humanity what humanity is, the flaws, and what makes us unique.
What does it mean to be human?
Yeah, but the problem with that is that isn't necessarily the case. Just because you have great genes doesn't mean that you're a soulless guy. So it kind of sets up a straw man in that respect,
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Unless at the beginning, the guy, one of the things that they filtered the genes for was contentment or compliance or conformity. If that was one of the things that they, I just threw the conformity gene in there for you just to make sure that he would be happy in society or something like that. That would be creepy and weird and be an interesting thing,
There is a Twilight Zone episode from their second incarnation, produced by Wes Craven in the 80s, where a guy breaks the law, and so he is put in solitary confinement. But what his solitary confinement is this machine shows up and puts like this like weird looking mark on his forehead, and he can't like cover it up with a hat or anything because it just burns right through. And basically what that means is that if you have that mark on your forehead, people are not allowed to associate with you. They can't talk to you. Like you're so it's like you're invisible. It's like you're ignored. And that is his prison. And he is trying to get people to talk to him, and they won't do it. And he eventually gets his he goes through with his sentence, and the mark gets removed, and he's back in society again. And and there's this woman who has the mark on her forehead and is in the same spot that he was in, but he decides to talk to her. And basically what the thing says at the end is that now he's in trouble again, and he's going to get the mark put on his forehead, but they have each other.
Okay.
And so, like, while the rest of the world is going to ignore them, and it's like going to be hell for them, but it's not going to be because they have each other to talk to and rely on.
It kind of reminds me of that other famous Twilight Zone episode, Eye of the Beholder. Do you guys recall that one?
Yes.
With the pig noses?
How the two of them came together at the end. But that reminds me, I was trying to remember this whole movie, what this story was reminding me of. Derek and I were mentioning before we started this that this story has a very kind of Philip K. Dick kind of feel to it. Mm-hmm. And there was another story, like I've seen something similar to this before, and I couldn't remember what it was. And it's called Harrison Bergeron. Either of you familiar with that?
No, not familiar with that, no.
It was a short story written by Kurt Vonnegut. I'm sure you're familiar with Kurt Vonnegut.
Sure.
Yeah.
Very good writer. It was a very, very short story, part of a collection of short stories called Welcome to the Monkey House. And it was actually adapted into a feature film made for Showtime. It starred Sean Astin and Christopher Plummer. Very, very, very good movie. Very good. For a Showtime movie, very good.
I have never heard of this movie. It's an
excellent film. I highly recommend it. Anybody listening to, check it out. It's good. It's called Harrison Bergeron. It's basically very similar to this, but a little bit different. In this movie, everyone is perfect. But in Harrison Bergeron, everyone is mediocre, except for Sean Astin. He's very intelligent. And what they do is, in this film, to make everybody equal, so there's no discrimination, they put bands, like these kind of antenna-like bands around your head. And you wear them throughout your whole life. And what that does is it reduces your IQ. So everyone is at like a C average, so to speak. So there's no discrimination. Everyone is equal.
Right.
Everyone's better than anybody else. And it's very similar to that in this sense. It takes place in the not too distant future in a world that seemingly seems perfect in a way, but flawed because they've taken away those things that make us unique. And I won't go any further into that, but it's very similar in a sense. I highly recommend it, but thank God I did remember what it was called because it was killing me. It's I like that callback right here. Sorry, the wind must have caught it. That was nice.
Yeah, the curious thing is, she steals a hair that turns out not to be his, but the other woman right next to her, who is also like checking out her date, uses the lip swab because she just kissed the guy. It would have completely destroyed his plan if Uma Thurman had chosen to do that.
Yeah, that's true. But she hadn't kissed him yet. Yeah. Do you think that Ethan Hawke ever has the impression that Jude Law is going to do what he does?
No, I don't think he does. No, I think he's kind of self-absorbed and is not really thinking about that.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's interesting because there are moments where the things that Ethan Hawke says and the way that the movie kind of plays out makes it seem like he's leaving Earth forever. But there is this scene where he says, like, when you get back, there's all this stuff so you can continue to be me. Jude Law says that to him, and like it's easy to forget that he's only going to be gone for a year.
Yeah, it does seem.
So when he comes back, he can continue being Jerome, and he can, get back together with Uma Thurman.
I have also saved enough urine for 2 lifetimes. I don't have a reason though.
I wonder. Yeah, that is something I've wondered about this. How did he accumulate so much?
Drank a lot of water.
It's urine samples and blood samples. He said enough to last a lifetime. I'm like, wow, that's a lot.
Drank a lot of water, ate a lot of beef. Yeah, it's like, when did he start doing this?
It's just a few days ago.
Yeah, because he's been drinking throughout most of this film. And, there was that scene in the beginning when he was...
Where he threw up.
Well, he was going for his interview at Gattaca, and he said, oh, this is a hot sample. You've been drinking again. So it seems... And he never seemed to stop drinking.
Right.
So I'm like, well, how did he get all these clean samples all of a sudden? But anyway.
Well, I guess since I guess at some point he came... And it might have been the scene where, he tried to get up the stairs and Uma Thurman showed up and everything. It might have been there that it clicked for him that, like, I'm going to stop drinking because I am going to kill myself and I'm going to succeed. But before I do, I'm going to do this one selfless... See, there's your likable... There's your likable character, Jude Law.
Sure. Yeah, he's the best character, I think.
Yeah. He saves the cat like a son of a bitch.
Which is
I knew somebody was going to say that.
Because, I mean, if you think about it, Jerome here is going to go off for a year to Titan and leave the woman that he just fell in love with. Hey, there's Jude Law hanging around. He's going to be here the whole year. How about the two of you hook up?
Not so much.
I found it. Yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it, and you refer to him as self-absorbed, and you're right, he is. But I don't think in a negative way. But I find it a bit disconcerting that he didn't.
I think it would have helped if the thing he was trying to do would not have just benefited him, because it really is just a thing of like, I just want to go up in space and look at the stars because they
Yeah.
are pretty. As opposed to I want to do this so that I could help somebody or cure cancer or something.
Well, I just thought that perhaps, yeah, you're right, but or at least that would have been interesting to see. But maybe Ethan Hawke would have been a bit more open and have noticed what Jude Law was going to do.
That
with
line,
it.
really bothers me. The right-handed guys don't hold it with their left or whatever. Like what? That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't mean anything.
Well, yeah, it does.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't hold it with my left hand.
I do either one. I'm ambidextrous. I don't care. It's just whatever. I don't.
Well, this is nice. Another callback.
Maybe I'm sharing too much, but
Perhaps. Well, this is a good callback.
It's a good scene otherwise, though. I think
he did.
The
He
way
does.
that the guy plays it. Yeah.
He does subtly mention early on in the film. I keep meaning to introduce you to my son.
Right.
He's a big fan of yours, and here he just said, "Oh, he wasn't all we'd hoped he would be." So again, just like Ethan Hawke here, he's perhaps he's not a godchild, but his genes were possibly altered, but weren't successfully altered.
Right. Xander Berkeley is his name, the doctor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Familiar character actor. I can't recall what else I've seen him in, but I know I have.
My theory is
I think he's in Lost Highway, which would have been around the same
There's
time.
a weird movie.
yeah. My theory is that
97.
Jude Law actually is just intending to take a nice hot shower, and he just turns the temperature up way too high.
Ouch. So, yeah. Yeah, see, look at this.
Yeah. He's gonna take his hot shower with his medal
this is very
on
Apollo.
and wearing a suit.
Yeah, that's true. It's a very
Sure.
Apollo-esque type of entry,
Yeah, it's true.
in terms of the.
Mm-hmm.
But you notice that the gentlemen closing the doors were wearing kind of what they did back in those days. They had the caps over their head and the white, but everyone else is still wearing their suits. Right here we're seeing that.
Yeah.
It's
They all look
very
drugged.
odd. Yeah, they're very serene looking, and there's
That's another kind of problem I have, is that for as hard as he tried to do, it's we should have been given some indication that this was something worth going to all this trouble
He doesn't
for.
seem to be doing a whole lot of navigating
not
right now.
right, not well. What I mean is, it's okay, we get some stars. Yeah, those are nice, I guess. But it's not like oh my god, that's gorgeous. And also, he doesn't seem too affected by it. I wanted to see him
I
crying
want to
or
see him
something.
have a heart attack right now.
Tears of joy.
He should have a heart
What?
attack right now.
the doctors were right. Oh, yeah, you're going to live 30.2 years.
It's so beautiful. Son
Well,
of a bitch.
this is I believe the score. It's called The Departure, and there's two pieces: The Arrival and The Departure, and they're very similar, but it's probably one of the best pieces in the film. It's very good, very moving, stirring.
I think that's funny. You gave him a lock of his hair.
I just felt that I think that the Jude Law character had obviously you said he's easier to sympathize with than Ethan Hawke's character because he does save the cat. But
You know what? This movie is which also came out in '97. This is Chasing Amy. This is the sci-fi version of Chasing Amy. because Jude
we're
Law
gonna have
was
to put that in the
Blame
show
yourself.
notes.
Jude
Put that
Law-
in the show notes. The sci-fi
Jude-
version of Chasing Amy.
Jude Law was secretly in love with Ethan Hawke, and he could not share him with Uma Thurman. So he
Isn't there still a debate
comes
of whether or not Banky was gay in that movie? I don't know. Is there still a debate over that? Whether or not?
I don't think there's a debate. I think Kevin Smith he doesn't take a lot of that stuff too seriously, so he tends to kind of just joke with yeah, he was he was at least gay for Holden, I guess. That's all that really
now
mattered.
we need a scene after the credits, one of those post-credit scenes where we have the landlord come in to show off the place. This is a really nice place. Let me show you the man-sized incinerator we got. Oh my God, there's a human bones in there. Oh, Jerome the astronaut must have killed this guy.
He was a murderer after all.
How did we find humor out of this very, very serious and somber film? Especially at the end when someone commits suicide.
We're just that good.
Yeah, well, as for Jude Law, you know, I was thinking, since he has such a turnaround, he's so very egotistical in the beginning, and at the end he comes around and feels for Ethan Hawke and is able to give himself for Ethan Hawke.
Well,
I found it that
he's kind of at the very beginning. He's kind of given up on life, and at the
it's
end,
true.
he's pretty
It's
much
true, but I
given
thought
up on life.
It's true, but I thought that Ethan Hawke had taught him an appreciation for life, and I felt that perhaps his suicide was unnecessary.
Well, it was definitely unnecessary. Yeah, I agree with that.
Dramatically, it works.
Yeah.
I can understand, but I just felt that perhaps the character had gained a knowledge, a life knowledge.
Well, I guess I'm sure he has. It just didn't stop him from. I still want to kill myself.
It's lazy writing, though. Is the problem?
It just felt like
as a
it just
writer,
felt like.
But now I'm going to feel really sad.
It felt
about
like
doing
that Jude Law had learned that you can still live life despite this handicap.
Right.
And it felt like a betrayal to the writing itself that he would choose to do this. It seemed like he had learned something, and then no,
it feels,
he's just going to kill himself.
Well, I guess it's the martyrdom or ultimate selfless act is that his maybe because he knows it's like, well, I can't, even with a new appreciation for life, I can't go on living because
the writer doesn't know what to do with me.
That's
the problem.
Well, fair enough. But I was suggesting that, like, you know, it's like, well, he has this life now, and I don't want to mess that up for him. So I was going to kill myself anyway.
Help from the Esperanto League for North America. There was the voiceover announcements on the PA system were in Esperanto.
Yes, I read that as well, which was actually a manufactured language.
Yeah, it's an artificial language that was invented like in the 19th century, but it enjoyed some popularity in the 1960s. It was used all the time on The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
I read that was it William Shatner made a movie that was shot in Esperanto.
Really?
I can't remember the name of the film. Yeah, it was shot entirely in that language. I can't remember the name of the movie though.
The Jersey Films logo went by. That's Danny DeVito's.
Oh, it is.
Company. Yeah. Hey, there's.
Oh, I didn't know there was another image after the credits. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I forgot about that.
You're right.
That
Danny
was
DeVito was a
Gattaca.
producer. Yeah.
Well, that was interesting. It's always interesting when the commentary goes in a direction you didn't suspect it would. Well, is there any closing thoughts for Gattaca, guys?
I think it's a very interesting experiment, but ultimately kind of a flawed and hard to love film.
Okay. How about you?
I like the film more now than when I first saw it, but I think I would agree with Tysto that it is a little cold and
you know what
hard
this
to
film
love.
needed? It
But I
needed
think
Danny
that
DeVito in it.
Hey, there you go. Maybe Danny DeVito could have played Ernest Borgnine's part.
Well, that would have been
I
interesting.
don't know.
I wouldn't give
Okay.
up Ernest Borgnine for the world.
No, I wouldn't either. But so you know, good movie. I think actually would have benefited from being made and released today versus 1997. But I don't know if that necessarily would have fixed the problems that the movie has.
Okay. To me, as I said, it resonated with me very emotionally at the time when I first saw it. Not so much today, although I still admire the film quite a bit. As I said, it's a very good freshman effort. I think Andrew Niccol is very talented as a writer. Definitely has. He's a good scribe. He's got the skill. I wish I had his skill. I think the problem for me now is that the love story, which I mentioned, I feel it's a bit weak. I definitely feel it could have been a bit more passion to it. Would have been nice to see. Although I think it's effective enough. Another thing is that I feel that the story, the message of the story, is a little too on the nose, and I think that kind of comes across in Ethan Hawke's voiceover.
Right.
I think it's directing us too much, and that's kind of made me wonder if I wanted to do, let's say, for a fan edit of the film, if I could remove the voiceover. And fan edits have become very popular these days. And I know there's a fan edit of Dances with Wolves that does remove the voiceover from Kevin Costner. And I've seen parts of it. It's an interesting experience to view the film in that way. So I wonder if this would have the same kind of effect, to view the film without that voiceover and discover things on your own instead of being kind of told.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not one of those people who's offended by voiceovers in general, so it's hard to say.
Oh, me neither. I'm a fan of voiceovers in film, but sometimes it goes too far, I think. It tells you too much. But
well, that's going to wrap things up for us. Thanks to Josh and Tysto for joining me on this.
Of course.
And you can always email the show, sofadogs@gmail.com, and write us a review on iTunes if you like, and join the Facebook group and become a part of the community and the discussion therein.
Yeah, you can find me at solusminions.yuku.com or on our website on Libsyn, or just email me at solusminions@gmail.com.
And I'm at tysto.com, tysto.com.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Good night.
Thanks for listening.